So, what is consciousness? Well, if you're talking about sort of medical professionals that are trying to determine if somebody is conscious or not, there's actually sort of a medical definition and sort of a medical kind of interpretation of, as to whether people have regained consciousness and what the likelihood of regaining consciousness happens to be. A number of sort of clinical designations, two specific clinical components that were identified by Plum and Posner back in 1980, actually. Wakefulness, so again, alertness and arousal, very dependent on, sort of brainstem projections, that ascending, network of, dopamine releasing, serotonin releasing, all these neurotransmitter releasing neurons that are localized in specialized subcortical nuclei in the brainstem. So when those switch on, and you remember there's lots of activity going through, sometimes called the reticular, remember the fan-like activating system? Well, then you're going to be awake, right? And you need to be awake in order to deploy all these distributed networks in the brain that let you, make decisions, pay attention, deploy biases, basically, engage in, conscious, activity, right? And then there is also awareness is the second clinical component of consciousness that, clinicians might test for if you, have had a traumatic injury, for example, and, people aren't sure if you're quite there yet, et cetera. They will test you not only for whether you're awake and you have normal circadian patterns that are dependent on brainstem activity, but also whether you are aware. And the awareness involves both awareness of yourself, like they'll try to make sure that you know who you are, where you are, what's happening, and also your surroundings, like you can identify things and you're able to be aware of what's around you at the same time. So these components are tied to specific brain networks. Again, wakefulness is really quite dependent on brainstem projections, and then awareness of self and surroundings is dependent upon distributed networks of gray matter regions that are connected, that are linked together by long-range sort of white matter connections, so the axonal connections, and injuries that damage, the networks, particularly networks that involve, thalamic cortical kind of communication and cortical communication. A lot of that white matter that we see, if we look below the surface of the brain that connects these different areas that, we've spent our lives, organizing and connecting in ways that allow us to, navigate complex social circumstances by changing, synaptic connections and changing patterns of connectivity. If those get damaged, that can have a significant impact, we'll see, on conscious experience. And those are the two clinical components of consciousness, both wakefulness and awareness of self.